What if I told you there's a question no one has dared to ask before? One so unsettling it's been buried beneath layers of silence, fear, and disbelief. You might think this is just another story, another warning, another conspiracy whispered in shadows. But right now, what I'm about to share isn't just a tale. It's something you're witnessing, something almost no one has seen, something they tried to erase before it could be understood. And you are the only one holding this forbidden piece of truth in your hands. I want you to take a moment. No, feel the weight of this. The heaviness that isn't just in the words, but in the space between them, in the silence that follows every heartbeat. You're standing on the edge of something so vast, so devastating, that it threatens to crush not just your understanding of the world, but your very will to believe. The question is simple, but it cuts through the core of everything you thought. You knew? What if this planet, the ground beneath your feet, the air you breathe, is slowly, inevitably, crushing you, not metaphorically, not spiritually, but physically, with a force so relentless and hidden that you don't even realize it until it's too late? Let me tell you what happened, and then I want you to ask yourself, how much do you really trust what you see? How much can you trust what everyone has been telling you about this place we call home? It began in the kind of moment that would slip past most people without a second thought, a quiet afternoon like any other. A woman named Helen, mid-30s, quiet, unremarkable to the outside world, was standing in the middle of her living room when she did something nobody else noticed. She whispered a single name, softly, almost like a secret meant only for herself. But it wasn't her voice that made anyone stop. It was what happened next. Helen vanished, not with a flash or a bang, no dramatic spectacle. She simply was gone. The air where she stood remained still, untouched, but she was no longer there. No trace, no explanation. Her husband was there, just steps away. He swore he heard nothing. Her daughter sat quietly on the couch, eyes glued to the television, unaware. The clock ticked on. The world didn't pause. No alarms. No emergency signals, and yet she was gone. That moment, frozen in time and space, marked the beginning of a shattering secret, the kind of secret so deeply woven into the very fabric of existence that it's been hidden in plain sight all along. You might wonder why no one talked about it, why it was buried beneath layers of silence and dismissal. The answer lies in the gravity, literal, crushing gravity of this world. You see, gravity isn't just the invisible force that holds you down. It's an ancient, ruthless architect shaping everything around you, from the tiniest atom to the vastest mountain. But what if gravity here was different? What if this planet's pull wasn't just a gentle embrace, but a slow, inescapable crush that squeezes the life from you bit by bit, second by second, breath by breath? The answer hides in the things you never notice, the slight ache behind your eyes, the fleeting dizziness, the moments when your body feels heavier than it should. Scientists call it normal. Doctors call it stress. Friends call it exhaustion. But what if it's the planet itself, pressing down with a force you can't fight and don't even realize you're losing to? There's more. Much more. A baby in a small town halfway across the country, just days old, uttered a name no one had ever spoken in that household. A name connected to someone long dead, someone who should never have been remembered. A voice from the past, cutting through time like a ghost trapped inside modern technology. A grandfather's old radio crackled to life, broadcasting a message only one family member recognized, words that didn't belong to this century, or any century they'd lived through. These are the threads of a story unraveling right under your feet, beneath the layers of comfort and complacency you cling to. If you're still with me, that means you're ready to see beyond the veil. But be warned, once you cross this line, there's no going back. Because what comes next doesn't just change your understanding of this planet, it changes everything you thought you were. Helen's disappearance was not an isolated event. It was a fracture in reality, a sign that something is wrong, horribly wrong with the force that keeps you anchored. And now a new sign appears. Something someone is trying to break through. Last night a figure was caught on a security camera in a place where no one should be able to stand. An area crushed by impossible pressure, where no life can exist. The footage is grainy, but the unmistakable truth lies in the way the figure moves, effortlessly, defying the crushing weight, whispering a name that nobody else heard, a name that holds the key to everything. I'm about to show you the clip, but before I do, ask yourself, how much do you really want to know? Because once you see it, once you understand, the planet that held you safe will feel like a cage. The weight of gravity isn't just around you. It's inside you, and it's coming for you. The screen flickers. The grainy footage appears. A shadow moves through the frame, slow and deliberate. A whisper echoes, barely audible but unmistakable. Elysium. And then, the figure stops. The air seems to shimmer, and the screen cuts to black. You don't know what Elysium means yet, but soon you will. Because this isn't just a story. It's a warning, and it's just beginning. The screen fades to black after that whispered name, Elysium, and for a moment you might think the nightmare is over. But here's where everything starts to slip, where you realize you can't trust your eyes, your ears, or even your own mind, because what you just saw, what you think you saw, is already unraveling before your very senses. The footage, the whisper, the vanishing. It all begins to flicker in and out like a faulty transmission. Static creeps along the edges, pulling. At the edges of your vision, pulling at your certainty. You replay it, slow it down, listen for that breath of a voice again. But it's not there. The whisper is gone. The figure, now only a smudge of gray, nothing but shifting pixels. The evidence evaporates like mist, leaving behind a haunting silence that feels less like peace and more like a trap. And then the memories start to fade. You try to hold on to them, the moment you watched the footage, the chill that gripped your spine. But there's a subtle shift every time you look again. Faces blur, details vanish, and that name, Elysium, mutates in your mind, sometimes slipping into something else entirely, a sound you never heard before, or worse, something you're afraid you heard wrong. You're not alone in this. There's a man, a stranger, or maybe someone you half remember from a forgotten corner of your past, who calls himself Marcus. He reaches out when you're most vulnerable, appearing like a ghost in your periphery, his words a mixture of comfort and confusion. He says things that sound like warnings, truths about the gravity of this world and the weight of the things you don't remember. But sometimes when he's not looking, you catch him twisting stories, shifting facts, contradicting himself in a way that gnaws at your trust. Marcus is a flickering presence, half certain and half deceptive, like a broken compass pointing to nowhere. His eyes carry a kind of haunted desperation, and you wonder, does he know the truth, or is he lost in his own spiral? Every conversation with him feels like walking on thin ice, every word layered with shadows and double meanings. He speaks of recordings, hidden files, voices from the past that contradict everything you thought you knew, files that claim Helen never vanished at all, that her disappearance was a fabrication, or worse, a symptom of a mind unraveling under pressure. Pressure not of gravity alone, but of something infinitely darker, more intimate. And what if it's true? What if the footage, the whisper, the vanishing, it's not real? What if it's a projection of a fracturing mind, a desperate attempt to piece together a shattered reality that refuses to hold together? You start noticing things, audio, glitches in your own memories, conversations with people who deny having said what you clearly remember. An old voicemail from Helen's phone, distorted, her voice warped beyond recognition, speaking in riddles that claw at your sanity. Fear seeps in, not the sharp, sudden kind, but the slow, grinding kind that settles deep in your bones, whispering that the real unsolved mystery is the truth behind what no one tells you, the memories they don't want you to remember. And just when you think you're losing yourself in this fog, Marcus leans close, his breath cold, and says something. That stops your heart. You're not the first to see it, but you might be the last to believe. The question hangs there, heavy and unanswered. What is real? What is false? And what, if anything, lurks beneath the crushing weight of this planet and the fragile walls of your mind? The story is no longer just about gravity. It's about the gravity of truth and the terrifying space where reality and nightmare collide, and you're standing right in the middle of it with no clear way out. The moment felt almost sacred, a fragile breath held in the stillness between panic and relief. For a fleeting heartbeat, the chaos unraveled just enough for the main character, call her Helen, though the name itself seems to shift now, like an echo lost in a hall of mirrors, to grasp at a thread of truth. She sat before a flickering screen in a dim room, the glow painting her face in sickly blues and whites, her hands trembling as she played back a series of recordings Marcus had unearthed from a forgotten archive buried beneath layers of institutional obfuscation and whispered warnings. The files were labeled vaguely, their metadata corrupted, but inside them was something concrete. A voice, hers, unmistakably hers, though not as she remembered. The voice was calm, measured, almost resigned. It spoke of a phenomenon called the compression, and hinted at a hidden truth long obscured by official silence and carefully crafted lies. For the first time, Helen felt the mystery fold into something tangible, something she could almost hold. The recording seemed to confirm what she feared. The gravity wasn't just a physical force, but a symptom of something far more insidious, a slow, suffocating pressure that bent not only the body but the mind itself. This wasn't just about a planet crushing its inhabitants. It was about the planet using that crushing force to erase, rewrite, and contain memories, to make people forget what they had lost, what they were losing. The truth behind what no one tells you was unfolding before her very eyes, a grim revelation that she was not crazy. They lied to you. There was relief in that moment, a false dawn breaking through the relentless fog of doubt. She allowed herself to believe it, to cling to the idea that understanding the mechanics of the compression would somehow grant her control, or at least an end to the slow unraveling of everything she'd trusted. The mystery uncovered finally. But then, just as the weight began to lift, a detail caught her eye, a frame in the recording she hadn't noticed before, a second voice, barely audible beneath the static and her own measured tones. It wasn't Marcus. It wasn't anyone she recognized, but it was there, whispering in a cadence too rhythmic to be accidental, too deliberate to be dismissed as noise. The words slipped through like a cold breath against the back of her neck, but the language was unfamiliar, alien, yet hauntingly intimate, as if dredged from a half-remembered dream she'd long buried. It shattered the fragile clarity she'd just gained. The hidden truth recoiled into shadow. Memories, too, began flooding back. Not her own, or at least not entirely, but pieces of a past so eerily familiar it felt like déjà vu amplified and stretched thin across decades. She saw a night from childhood or someone's childhood, indistinct but charged with terror and helplessness, a small figure standing under the oppressive weight of a sky that seemed to press down just a little too hard, a scream muffled before it could escape, a presence watching from the darkness just beyond sight, something that had been waiting since the beginning, silent, patient, impossible to name. It was a memory glitch, a fragment that slipped through the cracks of her mind, unbidden but real enough to claw at the edges of her sanity. The past mirrored the present in a way too precise to be coincidence, as though history itself was bending under the same relentless force, the same invisible gaze that never blinked, never faltered, always watching. Helen tried to dismiss it as a hallucination, a psychological echo triggered by the stress of discovery. But deep down, a primal unease blossomed, a certainty that the danger was neither external nor accidental. It was personal. It had been there all along, embedded in the spaces between her thoughts, in the silence after every whispered name, in the pressure that wasn't just gravity but something far darker, far more intimate. The twist came when she found a photograph tucked away in the archive, An image grainy and torn at the edges, but unmistakable. It showed a group of people standing in a clearing, their faces blurred but their postures stiff with fear. And at the center, a child whose eyes seemed too old, too knowing, an unspoken warning etched in the lines of a face half forgotten but impossibly familiar. That child was her. The realization forced her to rewind everything she'd just seen, heard, and believed. The mystery wasn't linear. It wasn't a problem with a neat solution or a singular cause. It was a loop, a trap, a riddle crafted to keep her, and all of them, spinning endlessly in a cycle of forgotten horrors and half-truths. And as the room darkened once more, the screen flickering back to static, the question returned, not as a whisper but a roar in her mind. What if the gravity crushing this planet is nothing compared to the weight of the truth you've been hiding from yourself all along? The entire story up to this moment demanded a rewatch, because now, every frame, every word, every silence was a key to unlocking the deeper terror lurking just beneath the surface. And no one, not Helen, not Marcus, not you, was ready for what lay beyond. You weren't imagining it. The unsettling feeling that crept beneath your skin, the whisper of eyes tracing your every move, the vague but persistent sense that this story, your story, is not unfolding in isolation, but is part of a far larger design. Because Helen isn't alone in this. There are others. Quiet ones, shadows moving just out of frame, watching, waiting, silently sending fragments of communication that bleed through the static, waiting for someone to decode them. And you, yes, you, are starting to see the signs. They're there in the flickers of the screen, the brief flashes of symbols that vanish before your mind fully grasps their shape. Cryptic sigils scrawled over grainy footage, coded patterns, that pulse faintly beneath the surface like a heartbeat out of sync with the rest of the world. You might think these are glitches, but they aren't random. They're messages. Shared dreams begin to invade your nights, vivid, jarring, impossible to dismiss as mere coincidence. You wake up with names whispered in tongues you don't know, faces imprinted on your eyelids, feelings of familiarity so deep they erode the boundary between your memory and someone else's. You were right all along to feel that you're being pulled into something far beyond your control. This isn't just about gravity crushing a planet. It's about the pressure exerted on identity itself, the fragile architecture of memory and selfhood, bending and warping under a force that no one has the courage to name. What you thought was your past, your history, begins to blur with someone else's narrative. A stranger's memories overlap with yours like a palimpsest written over again and again. You question what is truly you. Are you the sum of your experiences or a vessel for a story that's been handed down, altered and controlled by a presence lurking behind the curtain? Then a third voice enters the fray, calm, detached, but laced with urgency. This observer speaks in fragments, a stranger who claims to have uncovered the raw, found footage from 20 years ago that the government never released. Footage that exposes the foundation of this conspiracy and its insidious reach. Their words drip with a weary knowledge, as if burdened by truths too heavy to carry alone. This observer hints that what you've witnessed is a carefully constructed theater of control, a psychological battleground where memory is weaponized, and perception manipulated to keep you trapped in a looping nightmare. They warn you not to trust your senses, to question every detail, every moment you thought was real. Because the Watchers, whatever they are, have been orchestrating this. From the beginning, threading their influence through your dreams, your thoughts, and your very sense of reality. They are patient, unyielding, and intimately connected to the machinery of your mind. And now, as the darkness around you seems to pulse with silent intention, you realize that this story is not just unfolding for you. It is unfolding because of you. The line between audience and participant blurs, dragging you deeper into a web woven with secrets and half-truths, where every revelation only deepens the dread and the mystery grows ever more suffocating. The ending isn't here yet. It never was. It's a door cracked open, waiting for you to step through, charged with a raw, restless energy that promises both awakening and oblivion. And as you stand at that threshold, one chilling certainty remains. The truth is far more dangerous than the lies you were told, and far more alive than you ever dared imagine. It wasn't about the anomaly. Not really. Not about the whisper that turned to static, the name etched in dreams, or the memories that never belonged to her. It wasn't even about the Watchers, or the planet with gravity so dense it could crush the soul before the bones. No. What Helen stood face to face with now wasn't some cosmic horror or grand conspiracy. It was herself, and it broke her. Because the real question wasn't what had happened. It was why. Why had this force chosen her? Why did the missing pieces of memory fit so perfectly into her wounds, as if her pain had carved out a space just big enough for the truth to slide in unnoticed? She sat in the dim blue glow of the motel bathroom mirror, another night without sleep, another moment stolen by shadows, and stared at her reflection like it was a stranger mimicking her grief. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, something older, guilt, loss, recognition, she whispered to the mirror, not to see herself, but to admit it aloud for the first time. I wanted to forget. There it was, the real anomaly. The collapse wasn't out there in space in some forbidden file or encoded message. It was inside her. The first time it started, the whispers, the flickers, the distortion, hadn't been when she uncovered that footage. It was the night her sister vanished, the night she lied to the police, the night she convinced herself that silence was safety, and that not knowing was protection. But memory doesn't stay buried. It waits. It reshapes itself. It infects. Helen didn't stumble onto the mystery. She was the mystery. Her denial was the veil that allowed it to grow unnoticed, to fester. And the Watchers? Maybe they weren't outsiders at all. Maybe they were pieces of her. Or maybe, just maybe, they were everyone who's ever tried to forget something they couldn't live with. The file hadn't been forbidden. It had been personal. That was the real design. Not a conspiracy of governments, but of human minds desperately trying to survive their own truths. Trauma wrapped in fiction, grief dressed as curiosity, the desire to feel something real again, even if it kills you. Her phone lit up. A new message, no name, no subject, just one line. It wasn't just you, the room around her breathed differently after that, as if reality had been holding its breath, and now it was exhaling, slow, cold, and irreversible. So she stood, and she chose. Not because she had answers, but because she finally understood the question. The truth might destroy her. It already had in parts. But maybe, just maybe, letting it in could piece something else back together. Not the past, not the version of herself that played it safe, but the one who's no longer afraid of remembering. Outside, the motel sign buzzed. The sky hung too still. Somewhere across a dozen timelines, someone else woke up crying from the same dream. You felt it too, didn't you? That moment. When something inside you shifted. When the floor of certainty gave way beneath the weight of recognition. Maybe you were never watching this story. Maybe it was watching you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.